Hi, everybody. Here we are with the webinar, Being a Prescriber and Experiencing Prescribed Harm. My name is Carol, and I will be your host for today in this webinar, and I'm very happy to introduce the participants to you. Nicole Lamberson. Well, Nicole, let me start by saying to you, happy birthday. Oh, there you go.
Thank you so much.
Yes, it's your birthday today, so I'm going to introduce you first. So Nicole Lamberson is a physician assistant, and she has been disabled by a protracted psychiatric drug withdrawal syndrome since 2010. But Nicole is healing. She volunteers with the Benzodiazepine Information Coalition and the Benzodiazepine Action Work Group of the Colorado Consortium. Nicole has also founded Inner Compass Initiatives, the Withdrawal Project, and she does marketing, distribution, and outreach for the Medicating Normal film. And she's an associate at the International Institute for Psychiatric Drug Withdrawal. And we will be joined by Mark Horowitz and Louise Bundock. So let's tell you something about Louise. Dr. Louise Bundock, she's a psychiatrist living and working in Northwest England. And she graduated from Cambridge in History and Philosophy of Science in 2002, qualified as a doctor at St. George's University of London in 2009. And she trained as a psychiatrist at the Maudsley, and she is also a member of the Royal College of Psychiatrists. And she has a special interest in psychotherapy and has lived experience of protracted antidepressant withdrawal. And then finally, of course, there's Dr. Mark Horowitz. He's a clinical research fellow in psychiatry in the Northeast London NHS Foundation Trust. He's an honorary clinical research fellow at UCL and a trainee psychiatrist. He co-authored the Royal College of Psychiatry Guidance on Stopping Antidepressants, and he was also involved with the recent National Institute for Clinical Excellence guidelines on safe discontinuation of psychiatric medications. And that's not all, because currently he's writing the Maudsley Deprescribing Guidelines in Psychiatry, and they will be published in 2023. And in the meantime, Mark is also a co-investigator on the RELEASE trial in Australia, and they are evaluating the effect of gradual hyperbolic tapering of antidepressants. Now, Mark has an interest in rational psychopharmacology and deprescribing psychiatric medication, and he has experienced coming off psychiatric medications firsthand, which has formed much of his work. And he has a lot to say about this. And I must warn you that there is some discussion of protracted withdrawal in the interview, and this might be upsetting for some people. So if that is you, please feel free to excuse yourself if necessary. But also remember, these are all personal experiences, and that doesn't mean that they will also happen to you. So let's go over to our presentation. I'm just going to share my screen here with you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Nicole Lamberson, and I'm going to be hosting this conversation today for World Tapering Day. I'm joined by Mark Horowitz and Louise Bundock, who are both going to tell their stories. Mark and Louise, welcome. You are both psychiatrists with personal experience of taking and tapering antidepressants. So I guess we can start the conversation with both of you taking a few minutes to tell us about your personal experience with that. So who would like to go first?
I'll go first. So I'm a training psychiatrist, done some of my training in Australia and worked a little bit in London, mostly do research at the moment. But yes, I can tell you how I came to use antidepressants and then how I stopped them. So I was I did my medical training in Australia, in Sydney. I did my psychiatry training, started it there, and then moved to London to do a PhD, looking at antidepressants and the biology of depression. And I had been prescribed an antidepressant when I was in third year medical school. As I've said before, I was a miserable medical student. Didn't love memorizing endless parts of the body and different diseases. And I guess baseline, I'm a neurotic character, and I went to my GP. I'd read some self-help books about CBT, didn't find it helpful enough, went to ask for a medication, basically. And the GP wrote me a script very quickly, gave me some trial packs, and I was very excited to try it. I'd heard good things about it in lectures, and I was keen to give it a go. I took it. I had a lot of side effects to start with. I felt dizzy. I felt a bit out of it. I felt a bit similar to being stoned a little bit. I went back. I asked for a different medication, said this one doesn't suit me. I tried another one. It had similar effects. I had strange yawning. Went back a couple of times over a few weeks. Ended up on escitalopram or Lexapro, and I kind of thought, these all seem to have side effects. I'll just stick with this one, and I took it continuously for the next 15 years. In part, I went to do a PhD in looking at how do antidepressants work and the biology of depression, because I thought, I want to understand more about myself, why these drugs aren't as effective as people want them to be, how they can be improved. At the end of my PhD, I came across a journal article, actually written in a blog about it, that talked about withdrawal symptoms from antidepressants. And I had never heard about withdrawal symptoms from antidepressants before. And I found that a bit alarming, because the drugs that I knew that caused withdrawal effects were drugs like benzodiazepines and opioids. I thought such drugs, one, you get used to them, and two, they're not always very good for you in the long term. And that put into my mind the idea of trying to come off the medications. And so what I did over the next little while I was writing up my PhD was I looked up all the literature on how to come off antidepressants, and basically all of it said you can come off in 2 to 4 weeks, month or two. There are mild discontinuation symptoms. Some of the papers on that were written by professors at my institute. It was the Institute of Psychiatry at King's College London, and a lot of the official guidance said that. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. I also went to check Google, and I came across people who said, no, it takes a lot longer than that to come off. It takes people months or years, and some people have great difficulty. And I thought, oh, that was interesting. And I thought I would sort of hedge my bets and go in between those two different accounts. And so I halved my drug every month for 4 months, basically. So over 4 months, I went from 20 milligrams of escitalopram down to about 1 milligram of escitalopram. Things started getting rocky when I was down at 2, 3, 4, 5 milligrams. By the time I was at 1 milligram, I was having trouble sleeping. I was having basically panic attacks that would last most of the day. I would feel like I was being chased by a wild animal or something on the edge of a cliff. My heart was beating, my arms were sweaty. I couldn't get a moment of peace. I felt dizzy. I felt that things were not quite real around me. I felt in a kind of dreamlike space. And I had never felt like that in my entire life before. When I went on the medication, I was like any character in a Woody Allen film, neurotic, pessimistic, a bit of a mess as a medical student, but nothing like what happened to me when I came off these medications. I had never experienced panic like that in my life. and there were these strange dizziness, things that I'd never had before. I didn't want to go back up on the medication, in part because, as a slight aside, I come across people who said that they had become very tired and had trouble thinking straight whilst on the medication. And that was something that had happened to me. I'd had years of trouble with concentration, memory, and fatigue. And coming across that in other people's accounts made me start to think, were these problems in my life that were a very big deal for me due to the medication itself? And so for that reason, I was very keen not to go back on it. And so I held on, I white knuckled it for several weeks. It became worse and worse. It became, I started running 10 kilometers a day, every day, as a fairly couch potato type person back then, just to get a little bit of reprieve from how panicked and terrible I felt. And running 10 kilometers would give me an hour or two of feeling better, and that was worth it. And at that point, I think I was running until my toes bled. Eventually, it actually became so horrible. I moved from London, where I was living at the time, back to my parents' house in Australia in my mid-30s. Not the proudest moment of my life. I was in complete pieces. I didn't know what to do. I ended up going, I was very confused. I thought, do I need to be on more of this medication? But the medication seems to be causing me terrible side effects, I think. Do I need to be on less of it? Because when I come off it, I'm in terrible strife. I was completely confused. And in the end, I went back on a higher dose. I think I even went up to maybe a higher dose than I was on previously. And over several weeks, things calmed down. And I ended up basically back to where I was before I'd come off the drug. And I went back to training in psychiatry for a couple of years, kind of having at the back of my mind the suspicion that the drugs were not quite as simple to stop or quite as simple as they were presented, but I stayed on them. In fact, in that time, I saw more doctors and I ended up getting more medications to manage fatigue. Anyway, now 4 years ago, I decided to try to come off again. And this time, having learned from this experience last time, I thought I would listen to people on the internet. So this is people on forums like Surviving Antidepressants that I now read very carefully and decided coming off over 2 or 4 weeks was ridiculous. Coming off over 4 months was ridiculous for me, much too quick. And so I decided to come off over I thought this would definitely take me more than a year. I came off as slowly as they were recommending on these sites. I think I started at 20% a month, ended up going at 10% a month towards the end. And doing that, I guess a couple of things happened. One, as I came off this medication, I felt less tired, my concentration improved, my memory was altogether better, which sort of confirmed my initial impression. I had withdrawal symptoms, I had dizziness, I had a sense that things were not real, I had some trouble sleeping, but not nearly as severe as when I'd come off it in 4 months, years before. And that process has continued. I'm now in my 4th year of tapering. I think some people find that a bit alarming. I think I've gone much slower than I could have done because I've worked full time throughout the period of tapering. I think if I had stayed on it, if I'd taken a break from work, I probably could have come off it in a couple of years. But things have slowed down because I got very busy recently. And so, where I am now, I happen to be on 0.2 milligrams of escitalopram. I actually also ended up on mirtazapine, which I found harder to come off than escitalopram. I'm on 1.5 milligrams of that, starting at 15. And I'll probably take another year or two to come off. It still gives me unpleasant days when I feel like I can't think straight, especially when I go a little bit quicker, because I get a bit impatient sometimes, like everyone else does. But I've kind of found a way for it to sort of be in the background. I still always have residual symptoms. I'm not completely well, but I can sort of see in a year or two I'll be off it and hopefully start to improve after that. So I went on a bit long there, but that's been my story.
Yeah, thanks for sharing it. Louise, would you like to share yours?
Yeah, sure.